Okay, so it's just gone past. I'm sure people will slowly stagger in with their coffee from the break, but we'll get started with our next session. So welcome everyone to Showcase 2. This time we're going to be joined by Noon Films, and they'll be speaking about their project A Dangerous Journey. So I'll start with Lucia. Is a Zagreb-born director and producer based in Barcelona. Her award-winning work includes La Chana, sorry, I butchered all of these pronunciations, Lost at Sea and Pepi Fandango. Founder of Noon Films, she blends documentary and animation to explore identity and memory, with films screened globally and supported by major European and international institutions. And she is joined by Andreas. He is a Bolivian writer and producer known for award-winning works across film, radio and podcasts. He co-created Lost at Sea and the aforementioned Pepi Fandango, wrote for KCRW's La Vampira de Barcelona,
The Vampire,
and produced interactive stories
cool
for Tutul. As producer at Noon Films, he's active across European documentary networks. So welcome, and we look forward to your session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
A Dangerous Journey is a transmedia project. It's aimed at teenagers, 14 plus. And it's based on the testimonies of 3 children who were interned at the Rivesaltes concentration camp in the south of France. One is Pepi, who's a Sephardic Jew from Vienna, who escapes Nazi persecution and ends up in the camp. The second story is of Maria, 10-year-old Catalan refugee of the Spanish Civil War. And the third one is of Windela, a 12-year-old Manouche Roma girl.
From Alsace.
From Alsace.
North of France, border with France.
We'll go into more detail, but first
we should probably introduce ourselves a little bit. We're Noon Films, as was mentioned in those very nice sounding bios that we just heard. And you can always find more of our work on the website, which is up there. And these are the 3 kind of standout projects that we did. The production company was born with Lucia's first project, La Chana, which traveled to more than 150 festivals, won 17 awards, was nominated to the European Film Awards, did very well, and that was the kind of start of the company. And then we wanted to look at the two other projects, Pepi Fandango and Lost at Sea, because they're kind of the basis, in a way, of A Dangerous Journey in 2 very different ways.
Yeah, so Pepi Fandango was a project that I did, as you might have heard before. The name Pepi already is one of the 3 children whose testimonies we're focusing on in A Dangerous Journey. I met Pepi like 13 years ago now, I think, and did a feature-length documentary film about him. But the film is more from the perspective of now. It was like looking at what it means to carry trauma across a lifetime. It was aimed at an older audience, an art house cinema audience. But of course I got to know Pepi's story very deeply, very well, and also in that process, and in the process also of like the film traveling and so on, we also discovered how little people knew about what was happening in France, in the concentration, that there were even camps in France. And also of this like interesting intersection of 2 historical memories that happened there. So one of the things that we were left with was like, how can we reach a younger audience with some of these stories that Pepi was talking to us about? And particularly about the relationship of the children in this camp, these children from very different cultural backgrounds. So that was one of the kind of seeds for A Dangerous Journey, and then the other one was...
Well, the other one, I think, maybe we'll watch the trailer first for Pepi, since we just talked about it.
Yeah, we'll show you a short trailer, so you get to see the main.
Pan. Und en Diamelo, das ist Galo, das heißt Liebesmeer. Das fertig in den ersten Zeiten auch im KZ in Südfrankreich. zur plötzlich allein. In dieser Verzweiflung habe ich von mir eine Sache, die mich nicht loslässt. Der Gesang. Immer wieder Mare! Der Schrei. Ich konnte ja am Anfang damit nicht hören. Ich hatte panische Angst, dass alles aufreißt. Fratello de Rivera, Pedro, son 25 años que venimos aquí o más, ¿Qué fue qué? Ich muss meinen Fandango niederschreiben. Das ist das Transportmittel von Schmerzen, von Leiden, von Hoffnung. Das hat alles verdient. Ich kann es auch nicht vermitteln. Ich habe es nicht geschafft. Ich kann damit eigentlich nicht leben.
Ja, was willst du machen? Wenn ich was gelernt habe, ist aufgehen durch Paraphrase.
So this project, Lucia was working with Pepi over the course of almost 10 years, so a very deep relationship was built with him. But then there was also a process of research and understanding of that time that there was a lot of material that didn't end up in Pepi Fandango that we were trying to find a way that we could also think about it in a new shape, in a new form. Which brings us to this other project, which is a completely different world, let's say. But it's called Lost at Sea, and it was a short animated project that we did together with Doctors Without Borders and Presence. And it's about the Rohingya, using a testimony from a Rohingya man who ended up stranded at sea. The Rohingya are the ethnic Muslim minority in Myanmar who suffered a catastrophic genocide in 2017. And this story, what we were trying to do here was actually bring people close to one character. And I'm just going to show you a short 1-minute trailer so you can see it, because the process here was animation, which was our first step into this world. So the reason we show this to you as well is because of the technique that we use for this project is called rotoscoping. So all of the images that you saw are real archive or small recreations to fit the storyline that were then hand-drawn digitally, but hand-drawn frame by frame. So there's a kind of reality and not fantasy exactly, but a distancing from the horror that allowed people into the story. There's a very powerful effect that we noticed when this project went around. It had a real impact and really touched people. So we noticed that there was this power in animation.
Yeah, there was also sensitivity with the testimony and the question of safety for the person who allowed us to tell his story, which is also one of the reasons why we used animation here. But anyway, so between these two, working with documentary with, always this base of the real and the combination of animation, we came up with A Dangerous Journey eventually. Oh, there's Pepi with young people.
Yeah, this is a picture. I just wanted to put this picture, honestly. Through Pepi Fandango, Pepi actually got Spanish citizenship and gave his testimony to the Spanish Senate. And this image kind of bridges to a dangerous journey because it's him with these school children that gather to take a picture with him. And at the core of a dangerous journey, these are the people we're trying to reach. So, a dangerous journey.
So, a dangerous journey. What's our next thing? The trailer. Yeah. Maybe we just go straight into the trailer.
Yeah. More teasers, more trailers for you. This is the easiest way to explain the project overall. So here you'll get a good sense of what we're trying to do.
Pepi, a Sephardic Jewish boy from Vienna. Maria, a Catalan refugee from the Spanish Civil War. Windela, a Roma woman from Alsace. All three were ripped from their homes. All three were classified as undesirables. This startling color archive footage shows the building where Pepi lived shortly before he and his family escaped Nazi Vienna. Pepi, Maria, and Windela's stories came together in the Rivesaltes concentration camp in the south of France. 3 untold stories of 3 children that were othered, vilified, and imprisoned.
Les Espagnols sont entassés de juifs. Ils ont rien du tout. Si ce n'est le froid, le vent, le sable, la mer et des barbelés.
This is how teenagers in Europe learn about these stories now. How can these stories speak to them? What do they have to say about our present? What can a younger generation add to them? A Dangerous Journey is about bringing these stories to life. It is about opening up questions. It is about bridging the past to the present for a new generation.
Right, so the key objectives that we have with this project are basically to shed light on, well, I'm not going to just read these slides, we all know how to read. The big thing that we were looking at is basically this idea of what does it mean to be undesirable? How, like, being othered changed these 3 fates of these 3 children. And how, like, that concept can speak to the generation today as well.
Yeah, there's the unique aspect, or the thing that we thought was special, different about Rivesaltes and what was happening in France, is that the othering, that classification of being undesirable, affected the Jews, Roma, and the Spanish Civil War refugees. So that allowed for a kind of entry point from different cultural angles that we thought was interesting. So it allowed for looking at people from different points of view.
Yeah, and as we were working with the different testimonies, which we'll go into a little bit later, we noticed that, like, actually in each of the stories, like in the testimonies, like the most impactful part, for example, of Pepi's story is his relationship with the Spanish Roma. With the Gitanos. In Windela's story, one of her most vivid memories is like of these Jewish girls who were singing right before they were deported. So like, we depending on where you enter, it allows you to not just think about these things separately, but to break those barriers a little bit, to look for a way to kind of shape that up a little bit.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we were also trying to work with is to not start from the technology, So there were a lot of ideas about how we could do this. There's all these possibilities, VR, AR, and we actually started from where we wanted to get to first, and then tried to see what technology would match with that, or how we could get to them.
Yeah, so like the tech, we didn't want just effect. Like there had to be substance.
And then that fine line of giving agency, but also not, in Spanish you would say frivolizar, make the experience banal of what they're watching. And that question of offering a space for expression, which is a bigger theme that would be interesting to discuss together.
Maybe before we go into the deliverables, we can tell you where we are with this project right now.
Okay.
It's a very complex project with a lot of moving parts. So we are right now working on the prototype for Pepi's story and trying to find financing for the other 2 stories to add, because animation is also a very expensive format to work in. So we're looking on one hand tech funding, the Claims Conference funding.
Very generous support.
Very generous to build the prototype, exactly. And film funding, which is more our area, which we handle more.
Exactly, so we're working on the prototype currently. The other stories are in a kind of parallel development because the prototype also affects those other 2 stories. And the project as a whole, we categorize it in these three pieces.
3 products, deliverables of sorts.
The core are the 3 standalone narrative short films. So each of those stories you'll be able to watch as a short film, an animated short film that can travel to festivals, they can be broadcast on platforms for televisions, in museums, they can be packaged together, one can be taken on its own. It has its own kind of distribution and way of reaching people.
And each one is 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And animated by a different animation director in a different animation style. We only have, in each one there's one scene where they overlap, where we see one scene from 3 different perspectives in each one.
So in Pepi's story, you'll find Maria and Windela in one scene. So if you've seen the other stories, you'll have that Easter egg. But it's not that all 3 stories are interwoven, because that historically we can't really make that happen. And we'll go into more details in each of these, but these are the 3 main components, the 3 standalone short films, an interactive educational web-based app meant for educational centers, museums, and memory centers.
And schools.
And schools? Educational centers, yeah. But yeah. And then the installation version for museums and memory centers. This little graphic shows you a little bit of our workings. At the core of these testimonies, that's the heart of the project. Coming out from that is the educational thinking, the pedagogical ideas behind it, how we get further into the schools, but also how we teach. What are we trying to teach? Where are we trying to get? And then the last kind of, the outer core is that installation version.
And there's like an interconnectedness. What we're trying to work is this like interconnectedness between these 3 things so that each one feeds the other. There was even an interest, we just pitched this project at the Docs Barcelona New Tech Pitch, because that's the good thing about this project, you can move in a lot of different spheres from the film side and from the tech side and so on. And there was even interest for like a 1-hour version of a documentary for television, for broadcasters. So it's something we're contemplating right now. So if we're gonna add that to our already big workload.
So I think it's important to talk a little bit about each story so you get a sense, because each one has its own approach, not only in terms of animation, but in terms of content as well. So the first story, we do think about them in this kind of order. Pepi first. And Pepi's story, as we had mentioned, is about a Sephardic Jewish boy who, upon hate arriving to his town, has to flee, ends up in this camp, Rivesaltes, where he's separated from his mother and placed in barracks with children that are refugees of the Spanish Civil War, where he finds a friend. There's these core ideas in this project that have to do with othering, classification, propaganda, how you change people's minds about a group of people, but also about resilience, friendship, and finding empathy across cultural groups.
And we're working with Catalan, who is an excellent animation director from Colombia. And the style that she's using is also kind of, like the visuals are really important for us. For each of these stories, the visuals like add another layer of meaning to what we're doing. So she's doing analog work with ink. And that idea of ink spreading, losing control, not being able to escape kind of the darkness eating up Pepi's world as his world gets smaller and smaller and smaller until he ends up in the Rivesaltes camp where all of a sudden we invert the image and everything's darkness. And, he's looking for the light again in some way. So there's a beautiful way that she's working with this.
You can see in the top left is the kind of positive image, that's Pepi still in Vienna, and then at the bottom right, that's what you would see inside of the barracks. It's painted in negative. So they paint on white paper, but thinking that it's going to be transformed into negative color. We'll show a little video later where you can see her talking. Windela.
Yeah, Windela is the Roma story, and this is a very different approach. It's based on the first testimony she gave. It's a video testimony where she's talking to a historian, and he's trying to get her story. And it's about that clash between historical memory and emotional memory, because she's in her 80s at this point, and the way she's remembering things are in no kind of chronological order. She's remembering things that don't make sense, like boats in Rivesaltes, even though there's no sea, but it might have been Alsace or one of the other 6 camps she was at. So, he's trying to order this, trying to find something that he can use, and she's remembering things, and obviously remembering things, but she can't fit into his box, into the boxes that he needs. So, using that interview as a base, we are working between, anytime the historian is there, it's like the interview, documents, etc. When it's her, it's the animated world that she is remembering.
It's an interpretation. Yeah. And
overall, this whole project has a lot to do with interpretation.
Yeah, this one has something quite beautiful and very useful and interesting for kind of these deeper critical thinking questions. Because on one hand, you can relate very personally to how your grandparents or people in your family might remember things, how they tell their stories. And then on the other hand, the importance of how testimonies arrive to later generations. And that friction allows for very interesting discussion. Where does emotional memory, where's its place? And what's the importance and value and place of historical memory as well? And then the final story is Maria, a Catalan who had to escape Barcelona when Franco's forces took over the city, who ends up in Rivesaltes, first in Argelès as a refugee, and then becomes a prisoner once the Vichy regime takes over. And her story, of course, very different, but her story has to do with the transmission across generations. The objects that are carried across the generations, the stories we tell within our own family, what do we take from that, and the reinvention of identity. She was born a Catalan, became a Spanish prisoner, and then once she left the camp, she became a French woman with the Spanish heritage, but with this French, children and grandchildren and so forth.
And then one of the things with her was that she learned how to knit in the camp, and the thing that she was doing her entire life afterwards was knitting for other causes. And so we're playing with the idea of knitting, of undoing and redoing oneself constantly, looking for that identity within those walls of the camp. and also like as like she's also being, contacting and connecting with the other people there, it's like she changes, she becomes somebody else constantly. So that's kind of the base concept that we're working with Laura Ginés, a Barcelona-based animation director, to find that visual style in this story.
And in this one, we're also working very closely with Clément, which is Maria's grandson, who has become the kind of keeper of her testimony. He interviewed her. All these images that you see came directly from him, and it's very nice to have that direct connection to be able to work on this project. So this little image comes from Friedel Bonny-Reiter, who was the Swiss nurse who took care of kids in the camp. And she started doing these etchings later on in her life, and I just wanted to place this image because it's one of those core aspects of the story as a whole. This idea of interpretation. In this image, she's interpreting what she remembers. And in each of these stories, each of our animators are also going through a similar process like this. So here are the animators talking about their approach.
I think it's always important to talk about our past because I think it's kind of repeating. Windela, she has had the same age as my grandmother, and my grandmother, she went through Second World War in Ukraine. When I was a child, I never talked with my grandmother about her experience, and through my art, try to understand Windela and also maybe understand my grandmother too. It's a story from the past, but we live the story when Windela she was young, and I think we live this story with her right now. Because animation is also, it's a really interesting form of art. You can be, first of all, you can be attracted, and after you start to think. That's why I want to use colors and oil pastel textures. You can create a really good contrast with black and white photos. With my visuals, I can bring my point of view with respect and to celebrate also the emotional part of her memory.
Podéis poner imágenes a todo aquello que no se dice, que no se cuenta o que no puede ser representado.
Desde el mundo interior a la narración incluso de los hechos, pero a través como de metáforas. Me darían los elementos por separado para que después puedan convertirse en capas que digitalmente puedes darles, pues eso, variación de color, de intensidad, de tamaño.
Hay todo un contexto que todo el mundo ya pues, reconoce o tiene una idea formada y tenemos que ser capaces de romper los clichés o los lugares comunes y ser capaces de explicar cómo lo vivió ella.
La propia historia tiene sus objetos, sus documentos, sus papeles, su burocracia, entonces todo ese material también que se puede convertir también en nuestros escenarios para que se mueva el personaje. Como el personaje de alguna manera aprende a tejer, y esto está bastante relacionado con hacerse a una misma o construir su propio yo reparado después de los campos, pues pensamos que la idea de tejer o la idea de hilo podría ser un recurso visual interesante para que María construya ese mundo propio.
Pues la técnica es más de ver cómo reacciona las acuarelas mezcladas con una tinta lami, que es la que uso con el agua y cómo se va oxidando, dejando que la mancha también cuente, porque es muy difícil controlar tantas aguas. Entonces creo que puede ser atractivo para los adolescentes. Ahora uno está en una cosa como que todo tiene que pasar a toda velocidad y todo se consume, como TikTok, Instagram, no sé esto. Pero lo pienso sobre todo con el cuerpo y lo análogo, y creo que es algo que está llamando mucho la atención también en el mundo ahora, como esta necesidad de cuerpo, de qué significa dejar una textura en un papel. Nosotros cuando animamos hay como este cuerpo, como un gesto del cuerpo, y que la interactividad implica que el espectador también ponga como desde su movimiento. Entonces es interesante, como que no importa si es digital o análogo, como que igual involucra a mucha gente a intervenir en la historia, pero me parece muy chévere la mezcla, no hacer tantos bandos análogo y digital, sino como ver cómo se mezcla.
So we also wanted to share this with you because the whole process that we're making is also becoming part of the material that is at the heart of the possibilities of how to talk about these stories, and how this could potentially be something that isn't only for a history class. It could also be for an art class. It could be for a critical thinking class.
Theory of knowledge class and adhesive sort of curriculum or something.
Exactly. So coming back to what is this thing? This big beast. From those narrative stories, we're developing this interactive educational web-based app, which uses the core linear stories and transforms them into interactive experiences with a very particular type of interactivity. We've defined the interactive design in two ways. One is an interactivity that puts you closer to the story, connects you with the characters, and on the other hand, fosters these critical thinking ideas that are at the heart of the project. And we'll get into more detail with the XR one. So this particular web-based app, it's, as you can see, targeted to teenagers 14 plus, schools and memorial centers and museums, meant for mobile, tablet, and desktop. It's going to be in 5 languages. The cat there at the end is Catalan, because we're based in Barcelona, so we're gonna definitely have to have a Catalan version. And as I mentioned with the interaction design, we can give you 2 examples that we're developing right now. One, to foster a connection with the character, for example. At an early stage, when Pepi and his mom are still in Vienna and the darkness is starting to get around them, Pepi's mother lifts him up to hum a melody. So you'll be able to choose one of 3 melodies. And then that melody that you choose will become part of the soundtrack. So it will appear throughout the story in certain moments. So you'll have this unconscious sensation that that's your melody. That's my melody again.
You've chosen like what's comforting.
Exactly. So you're put in the role of protector in one way. And then another example is using these propaganda posters to give this tool that the user can actually interact with the poster, rip, write, draw.
Yeah, there's a moment when Pepi and his mother are like escaping, returning home, and there's these posters that are being put up on the streets. And the interactivity is you enter closer to it, and like you're given the possibility to destroy the posters, but underneath are more posters, and there are more posters and more posters. So like that idea that there's actually, unfortunately, like that hatred it's
gotten deep.
It's gotten really deep. And it's one of those points where a teacher can stop and go deeper also through the teacher's toolkit, which we'll get to later.
The interactivities are kind of flagpoles for that educational toolkit that would happen at the end of the story that goes into the hand of the educators. But those 10 poles allow for that broader discussion at the end. How are we doing on time?
So about 25 minutes till the end of the session.
Great.
Yeah, we can do this quickly maybe.
I'll just show a little bit of
the
this.
important thing is that throughout, we're working with teenagers from different countries to try, like from the scripting stage already, we had them read the scripts, give their feedback, tell us what they understood and didn't understand, what they thought of the interactivity ideas, whether they seemed like banal or not.
Just keep talking.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put it on.
So like in each stage of the project, we're trying to get that feedback, and it's very interesting for us also to see what they know and don't know from the perspective of our age.
So this footage that you see here was like a script workshop that we did with a group that had from 14 all the way up to 17, to see also the differences of how certain things were hitting such a big difference in those groups. And this shows you some of the notes that they gave us permission to show, like how they took notes and how they were thinking about things. And here you can see.
Dice que los motores de las mujeres vemos la forma descolorida de una insignia de la estrella de David, no sé qué es. Y si encima en la peli no te ponen ni que es una estrella de David.
No, sí sabes qué es, sí sabes qué es. La estrella de David.
Las típicas estrellitas amarillas que todos ustedes en la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Me pareció curioso ese momento en el que las niñas están cantando en coro francés y las madres te lo ven con orgullo. Me ha gustado porque es como voy a decir como ya no somos españoles, no sé qué, como que España ya no es su país y pues quieren integrarse a Francia, pero Francia está ahí en los campos.
Pues a mí me gusta mucho la escena del pájaro. Como que sale el pájaro, no sé qué, y luego vas tú a la vista como de arriba y ves como los Pirineos, cómo va la gente, no sé qué. Eso me gusta mucho.
And then these images show you some of the design sprints that we did remotely, where each of us would work together. These are ideas directly from teens with specific thoughts on a specific interactivity or on the AI tool, which we haven't gotten to.
Yeah, some of these were a combination of tech people, teens, animators, and us.
All working together.
All working together.
And yeah, it shows you a little bit how we were working. So then probably one of the main things or things that is most interesting to people is this idea of the AI and the AI tool and how we're thinking about it. So here we put a base, very quick summary of how the AI is going to work, in the sense that it's a closed data set. We are training the AI based on what we're looking for as a result. The AI is going to be trained on the artwork of the animators, so the resulting images that are generated are going to have the style of each of the animators in a way. And the prompts are defined by us. One will be gesture, in Pepi's case, which is a good example.
Explain when they're going to be, when the AI tool comes in.
So basically in Pepi's story, you experience the story with those moments of interactivity, and then at the end, you have this chance to draw something. And that scribble that you do on a tablet or that you do with your mouse will then be transformed into a sunflower. The sunflowers were the only things that were growing in the camp. That nurse that we mentioned earlier, she planted a field of sunflowers because they grow rather quickly, so there was something that the people in the camp could look at that was alive. And in the story, these sunflowers mark a passage of time, but also symbolize that relationship between Pepi and Paco, this boy from Spain, and the resilience and hope that's in that. So this sunflower that you receive is a symbol of that. And then you can return your sunflower back into the project. The idea is that as more and more people watch the story, those sunflowers start appearing in the scene that you've seen with the sunflowers earlier. So when you see those scenes with the sunflowers, you'll see something strange happening with the sunflowers, but you'll just see sunflowers growing. And then at the end, when you receive your sunflower, you'll realize that those frames came from other people that have watched this as well. So it's a way of you receiving something, but that you can also give back to the project.
And become parts of that historical memory in some way. And with Windela's story, the thing we're toying with now, we're still like very early with this, is using like sound. So like one of the things that's like in her story is the memory of this song that the girls sang So like at the end, what you'll be able to do is like hum a melody that's important to you. And then in that scene where there's the girl under the table, the silhouette of these girls will change depending on what memory you hummed. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Your humming will create a kind of contour as you sing. You can imagine the song going like this, and then that contour will draw a version of that memory that Windela had. That is, in her mind, blurry, but it'll be different according to each person's humming.
Julia style in this case.
Yeah.
So with each one at the end, that's that moment of expression is where we're using this tailor-made ethical AI tool.
Yes.
That we're developing.
And this has been a conversation, and since we began the project till now, AI has been transforming, so it's a continuous adapting as we go forward with this.
Yeah. And lastly, the installation, and then I think we'll close it.
Yeah, and then we can open it up for discussion because it'd be interesting to hear from you. But taking from this idea of the sunflowers, the idea would be that then in the installation version of this project, those sunflowers are also growing. So in real time, you can see if somebody has made a sunflower, that becomes apparent in the installation version as well, so that the two are kind of linked.
And that's like still in very early development, these ideas for the installation.
Exactly.
And we're very open to ideas and collaborations and everything.
So very quickly, we're working with the Council of the Wise, historical, educational, technological consulting throughout the process. And we are working with different institutions in various ways in order to try to get the project into these different windows. And yeah, we've had a lot of challenges.
And dilemmas along the way.
Which would be interesting to discuss. I think one of the things that's come up with AI is how do you allow expression and yet protect? Where's the line there?
Yeah, it's like if you're giving are you allowing them to express themselves or are you not? Because like, what if they draw, I don't know, there's always the danger of the dick pic. Sorry, I never know. With teenagers.
That's what we call it internally. How do we protect?
And you know, but then if you don't allow them to express themselves, that's also...
You're kind of hindering the whole project in a sense, yeah.
But I guess according to our tech person, the dick pic can be transformed into a flower anyway. According to, yeah. So that's one of the big dilemmas we're having there. And then also like whether... There was an interesting thing that came up in one of the pitches where it was like, if you are giving young people an expression, what do you do with, like, it's valuable information. How are you going to, can you collect it? Is there something more you could collect there? If you reach that point where they're willing to do something, maybe there's something else they can express about hatred, about othering, something that's personal to them, which is valuable information. And, you know, what do we do with that? Can we do something there? Is there someone you can partner up with who can help you, or it would be useful for? Because we're creatives, that's one of the big questions we also have, is like, what you have up there is like, where do we stop and others start? Because we can create something that's, you know, that is beautiful, that will work in film festivals really well, that will work in, that will function, but we want it to live. And we wanted to travel, and we wanted to have a broad distribution, and we need other people there to help us get there.
Yeah,
So,
I think probably a lot of the projects here have a similar problem,
yeah.
or a similar issue to deal with. And it's one of the interesting things about being here, to be able to discuss it with other projects. There's challenges that we share, for example, with our colleagues at Alsace, which is how to get to schools, how do you get into schools? The teachers are kind of, you know, overwhelmed, dealing with so much at the same time. How can you get something to them that is useful as well, that you're actually making their life easier rather than just adding another layer of complication for them?
And doing that in 5 different countries. So anyway, please, questions.
Okay, fantastic. So we have 15 minutes for questions, so we'll just open the floor, otherwise we can pick up on some of those threads that you just mentioned.
Yeah, of course. We can always go back to anything that you were curious about. We can go into more detail. There's a lot to talk about.
Thank you so much. This was really, great. The animations look really beautiful. You said that you wanted to focus on othering and the children being undesirables. And you also want to use it in an educational setting. How a little child probably doesn't know that this othering is happening because of anti-Semitism. How do you? But I would argue it's probably useful for children and school children, students to learn a little bit about anti-Semitism. So how do you bridge that gap, I guess? So how can you tell the story from the perspective of a little child that feels other, that feels maybe bullied, but also give it this greater context of this is not just bullying because they have but this is like anti-Semitism or anti-Roma sentiment or whatever.
Absolutely. You work in education? I'm just curious about it. Yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons that Pepi story is first. Because the clarity of the before and after, the world before, let's say, the family life is the first thing that you see. The joy of their house and the livelihood of it. And then quite quickly, these shadows start coming into it. At first, it's a metaphorical, like ink, that is literally kind of occupying the space outside. There's a sense that there's something dangerous happening outside. And then it becomes very manifest with this use of the propaganda. That's how we make it more, solidify the idea. And that's why there's an interactivity precisely placed there so that you can also expand on this and go into further detail.
Yeah, this is where like the teacher's toolkit comes in. It's like really important how that is created and developed, and we're working with like who we call the Council of the Wise. We have somebody from educational experts in there, historical experts for other questions that we also have that come up during this process around, where do we have space to put our own interpretation of something, and where do we have to be 100% or as accurate as we can be. How archive and documents are used. So we have someone to help us with that, because this is, I think, an extremely good question, and I think it's we want to maximize precisely that kind of knowledge. But what can we provide in this app so that it's useful to open it up to a broader discussion?
It's the entry point.
It's the entry point. Is there, and this is one of the things we're talking about with the tech company too, does the teacher stop it there and they can enter into something that allows them to go further, like an additional kind of almost interactive section that's just on how propaganda, particularly in this case, because we're talking, it fits with the story, how propaganda led to or created, amplified anti-Semitism. And we're still in that process, so the question here is what are the most important things we can draw out of each of the stories, because we can't cover everything, and how can we help teachers talk about this with students in a way that's visual, that's effective, and that allows them to do it within the time frame that they have for the class.
The propaganda was something that we centered on with Pepi's story, because there's a possibility, or we feel that there's this possibility of also talking about that now. Before it was just print, poster, pamphlets, exhibitions, but then how does that work nowadays? How do you, how insidious is it if it's on social media? What happens if something is generated? AI generated, that is fake, It allows for a discussion that also ties a little bit to the present. But thank you, yeah. It's an important question.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No,
you go ahead. You're already sorry.
I'll wait.
Okay. I was really interested in the AI component of this, particularly. I mean, usually when I see these things, I brace for the worst, but then I saw how you're handling it, and it's absolutely the right way to go. but I don't know if you mentioned it. I came in a little late. I didn't. I'm not sure if you mentioned what kinds of platform or software you were using for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's like the base API. We've tested different base APIs, you know, like from the OpenAI to Stable Diffusion to various different ones. And our most recent addition, Cristo, they've taken and actually developed their own API that they use. They're an animation studio. And they've created it as a way to generate 3D and 2D stuff relatively quickly for kind of workflow reasons. But he really digs the project, and we're thinking of ways to use theirs, basically, to be able to train theirs, keep it closed, and work that way. Yeah. Yeah, it's a question. I mean, that's the thing. Everything, which one you use, it's a lot of questions. Yeah. We've had to learn a lot.
You have to have a good lawyer to a lot of these questions.
But yeah, I think overall there's that there's a lack of knowledge of how the different companies operate. You know, it's always an interesting thing to do if you're curious about these AI things, to just read their the legal document. How, you know, what you're signing up for when you use a free generator. It says a lot. Yeah.
So, I just wanted to comment on the sunflower piece, because I think that's actually genius, because it's a sunflower, it's bright, it's happy, and I don't know what the teacher toolkit is, but maybe the takeaway is spreading a little happiness. So one thing they could do is take an actual sunflower, they can press it, wait, and then they're keeping the sunflower, opening it a month later, and they're remembering the story. Or maybe they're planting a sunflower and giving it, so they're paying forward happiness and you know, not the, because everybody was a teenager and it's hard. Teenagers are mean. So
yes.
You know, we have to teach them, and it's our responsibility as parents and adults to teach them to be nice and to pay it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've been kind of lucky so far in the teenagers that have collaborated with us, because we always started off feeling like, oh, these, you know, they're gonna hate it. They have no, you know, they have no attention span. They're mean, you know. And it's a little more nuanced. There's a, you know, like humans in general, there's this variety, and it's nice to see that sometimes we're even surprised at their reaction sometimes as we're working with them. But anyway, thank you for that.
I'm just going to feed off of that comment and then pass on to Simone as well, but I think there's something deeper to do around sort of symbolism and flowers and actually Holocaust narratives. So Rivesaltes has the Sunflower, really important book. There's a podcast that I think Iri did, which was around sunflowers, and he was fearing that he saw graves marked by sunflowers, and there's this fear that he wouldn't have an unmarked grave. Also worth mentioning is the Auschwitz standalone. Simone and I went to the Lake District, and there's an incredible exhibition there around kind of forced labour, trying to produce rubber. So actually there's a kind of, there's a duality to that kind of thing. So I just wanted to sort of...
That's powerful.
Yeah,
that's
I can
really
send you
nice
some
thought.
links to that.
That
It's actually in the Lake District in the UK. It's a really great exhibition. So I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, just following from Kate as well, it's an excellent project. And when I was listening to it, I thought, I'm a professor, lecturer at university, so I was thinking in terms of, potential uses, and I was just thinking as well, what you talked about, I actually think would be great for art, but also VR teaching, about the methodology, quite specific, about how you brought together the archive, what you did, you regenerated the archive, the photo archive through illustration, drawing. I thought that was quite powerful. But when I was listening, I was also thinking, it's a lot. There is a lot, and I'm just thinking you as kind of, curators of what is almost like a multi-dimensional installation piece, really, that lives in, the VR XR world, but also one that, with the web-based app, whether or not that has virtualization, that you go to Rivesaltes and you do this kind of thing as well. So I'm wondering how much association you've had with the camp and with the Memorial de la Shoah in Paris, because they also have funding. Austria has funding. There's many places where you can get funding.
Absolutely. No, and
yeah.
Absolutely. With Rivesaltes, luckily from the start, because already when Lucia was filming Pepi Fandango, it was the first kind of contact with them, and we accidentally met who would become the head of history at Rivesaltes when we were researching Alsace, the camp that was on the beach, Alsace. He became the head of the historical department in Rivesaltes, so we were just there.
And they're like fully supporting the project, and they're also one of their team is going to be on the educational council for us. And they have the interesting thing is they have a space as well.
That's what I just thought in terms of, when I was thinking, I felt like there's congestion.
Yeah.
And I actually thought, it would actually be quite interesting when you talked about the sunflower to actually extract a lot and have like an exhibition, installation that really returned the virtualization to the real world.
Yeah, that's actually really nice.
And brought in the sunflowers as actual real dimensions, and is like knitting and weaving, and actually return the people to the place, right? Because it just ventilates it.
Yeah.
Because I feel as though you've got so many objectives, and I actually think these films will be very powerful as a minimal kind of. There's a lot in them visually, but also experientially and spatially, because I want to know if there's geography, what's the distance being covered, what's the meeting point where they converge in Rivesaltes and then they diverge, right, and how they connect. So for me, as I would think if I was a teenager and you're getting all of this feedback, I would be overwhelmed and I'd be like, okay, stop already. Like, I'm going to decide. And then you have the exhibition, you open it up to the teenagers, let them decide.
That's nice.
That's where they kind of do the participatory work and the curation, and they can do this kind of more artisanal creation and responsive work.
Okay.
And that way it brings in the various museums that you are seeking to target and on board, but it also preserves, I think, what is the real, novelty of this kind of site, of the short films, and then the app as well, I think should be kind of like minimal. So I think the films could be expansive, minimal, and then the museums bring this 360 return from what was real life, where it happened, to the virtual world, and then back to the real world.
It's really nice. And you tapped into kind of one of the underlying things about this idea or decision to use very analog animation, because we're trying to start from something very
and animated
physical.
talks would be excellent, because they're doing such interesting work with the kind of smudging practice, the teaching other animators would be.
Yeah, and exactly. You can bring that into that space. I think presumably, people who watch the film don't get to see the richness of those clips you just showed us, of those memory makers in this process. So it kind of brings them back into the fold. And one of them there was saying, I animate the one who's something with ink, like I use my body to do it. And so then you have that tension between using a digital drawing tool with the sunflower, but this has all come from a body, an embodied materiality, so that tension can play out in the museum space. I think that's really nice, yeah. Sorry, someone else had their hand up. Yes.
I really like this project. It looks amazing. When you were talking about AI and kind of like the misuse of like gestures and images and sounds, that was one thing I was thinking about. And I was wondering whether that, because you say at different points, like when there's interactivity, that's where the kind of teachers can come in and talk about their propaganda and stuff like that. And I wondered whether that could be built in as a learning point, so if someone does draw a dick pic, instead of the AI just going, okay, I can turn this into a sunflower, whether it kind of flags up some things that makes users consider, okay, like, and not in like an accusatory, like you've done a bad thing kind of way, but like, why did you think that was appropriate? Like, what's, like, generating a larger conversation about that kind of stuff, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
I don't know how practical it would be.
I know, but I know what you mean. It was one of the things that we were always talking about. Is like the danger is that you point to somebody and like single them out.
Yeah, which wouldn't be productive at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it allowed for a deeper talk, that would be really awesome. I'm not sure how, but it's something, it's food for thought, for sure.
Great, we maybe have time for one more question if anyone's interested, otherwise